In the shadowy forests of Middle-earth, where ancient trees whisper the secrets of ages, ruled Thranduil, the king of the Woodland Elves of Mirkwood. His name, shrouded in legend, became a symbol of wisdom and strength in an era where darkness threatened all living things. Thranduil, the Lord of the Elves, whose roots trace back to the depths of the First Age, was not merely a ruler. He was a keeper of ancient traditions and a protector of his people in the darkest of times. His story is one of struggle, wisdom, and the inevitable departure that marked the decline of the Elven era. The name Thranduil, translated as vigorous spring, which corresponded to his appearance. He was a tall and slender elf who seemed eternally young. Only his eyes betrayed the fact that he had lived in Middle-earth for centuries. Thranduil's hair was as golden as autumn leaves, and on his head he wore a crown of forest berries or flowers, depending on the season. This detail distinguished him from other elven kings, who used more traditional crowns made of various metals. Thranduil often played the harp, crafted from the roots of ancient trees. His melodies could summon rain and soothe wild beasts. When he played music, it seemed as though the distant, detached expression left his face. Thranduil was born in Doriath, the great kingdom of the Sindar Elves, ruled by King Thingol. His father, Orofer, was one of the noble elves who served Thingol. At that time, Doriath was a bastion of beauty and strength, but the First Age brought wars and destruction. Thranduil, though still young but already wise, witnessed great battles such as Dagor Bragollach, the Battle of Sudden Flame, and Nirnaeth Arnodiad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, where Morgoth's darkness threatened to engulf all light in Middle-earth. After the fall of Doriath and the death of Thingol, Orofer and his son Thranduil left the ravaged lands and journeyed east in search of a new home. They settled in Mirkwood, a vast and mysterious forest where ancient trees concealed both beauty and danger. Despite the necessity of maintaining trade relations with their neighbors, Orofer's kingdom was quite isolated from the outside world. The Elves of Mirkwood avoided dealings with the Dwarves of Moria, whom they blamed for Thingol's death. They also kept their distance from other elves, including the Noldor and Sindar. However, peace in Mirkwood was short-lived. The Dark Lord Sauron returned to Mordor and once again sought to enslave all living things. His fortress, Barad-dûr, loomed over the land as a sinister symbol of darkness. But even in the darkest of times, hope did not fade. Sauron forged the One Ring to dominate the other rings distributed among elves, men, and dwarves. To fight this evil, the last alliance was formed. Among those who stood under the banners of the alliance were the Woodland Elves of Mirkwood. Their leader, Orofer, led his warriors to battle. They were not as numerous as the Noldor or men, but their spirit was unyielding. Moreover, they possessed exceptional agility and were renowned for their archery skills. Orofer, crowned with autumn leaves, led his warriors into battle alongside his son Thranduil. His voice called them to victory, but his pride and independence became his curse. He often charged into battle without coordinating with allies, and many of his warriors perished under the blows of the orcs. In one of the fiercest clashes, Orofer met his fate at the foot of Mount Doom. There, he fell, slain by the enemy. His son, Thranduil, took command. With grief in his heart, he led the remnants of the army out of the bloody carnage. The Woodland Elves, wary but unbroken, returned to their shadowy forests to mourn the fallen and regain their strength. The war continued without the Elves of Mirkwood and was ultimately won. Thranduil, who had withdrawn his forces, proved himself as a ruler who prioritized the survival of his small people and their culture above all else. The death of his father left a first tragic mark on his soul. It made him cautious and distrustful of other races. Mirkwood became even more secluded within itself. Thranduil ruled the elves from 3434 of the Second Age until 172 of the Fourth Age. His kingdom, Mirkwood, or Erin Lasgallen as the elves called it, was a place where light and darkness continued to struggle for dominance. But under Thranduil's rule, the elves found relative peace. At the beginning of the Third Age, the shadow of Sauron, who had fortified himself in the stronghold of Dol Guldur in the south of the forest, once again threatened their world. The giant spider, Shelob, and the wraiths from the Misty Mountains, true spawn of evil, ensnared the forest in their webs. Yet, Thranduil did not fear to confront them. However, he avoided direct confrontations with Sauron and his armies. Thranduil remembered his father's fate and that of his loyal soldiers. He could not afford to lead his people into full-scale war. The king built his palace in caves where the light of stars and the moon reflected in crystals, creating the illusion of an eternal sky. Let us dwell on it in more detail, for this magnificent structure reflects Thranduil's character. The palace was located in the northern part of Mirkwood, in a dense, mysterious forest known for its eerie atmosphere. The caves where the palace stood were of natural origin, but the elves significantly expanded and adorned them. The entrance to the palace was hidden among trees and rocks, making it nearly invisible to outsiders. Inside the caves, spacious halls were connected by winding corridors that seemed endless. The corridors were decorated with columns carved in the shape of trees, and the ceilings resembled forest canopies. Instead of conventional lighting, magical lamps emitted a soft, natural glow, reminiscent of moonlight or starlight. Because of this, it always seemed to be evening there. The throne room was the heart of the palace, where Thranduil sat on a throne carved from wood and adorned with silver and gold. The throne room was surrounded by fountains and streams that flowed directly through the caves. Even underground, the elves created a semblance of nature. Some halls featured small gardens with plants that grew without sunlight, as well as lakes and streams with pure water. Thranduil was married to an elven lady whose name history has not preserved. From their union was born Legolas. She was beautiful and wise, but her fate was tragic. During one of the monster attacks, she perished when Legolas was still young. How exactly it happened remains unknown. Most likely, orcs or spiders were to blame. This loss made Thranduil even more reclusive and severe. Elves are immortal beings, which makes their grief over the loss of loved ones particularly profound. This was evident in Thranduil as well. His face, always calm and majestic, sometimes bore traces of past sufferings, scars left by battles and losses. He concealed numerous scars with magic, but would lift the enchantment when he needed to show, by his own example, the horrors that war could bring. Preparing for the fateful events and understanding all the dangers lurking in Dol Guldur, Thranduil fortified the borders of his kingdom, creating a network of watchposts. He regarded any outsiders with suspicion. Therefore, it was only logical that he captured Thorin Oakenshield, heir to the dwarven kingdom of Erebor, and his companions. In the year 2941 of the Third Age, fate brought a company of dwarves led by Thorin Oakenshield and the Hobbit, Bilbo Baggins, to Mirkwood. They attempted to secretly cross the forest on their way to Erebor to slay the dragon Smaug. However, they soon lost their way and became hopelessly lost. Their situation worsened when they were attacked by giant spiders. Shortly after, they were captured by the elves, on whose territory they had trespassed. This conflict reveals Thranduil's character in a deeper way. The situation was more complex than it seemed at first glance. This event was preceded by a feud between dwarves and elves that had lasted thousands of years. The dwarves had killed Thingol and had long competed with Mirkwood for influence in the region. However, what concerned Thranduil the most was the return of the ancient treasures. He demanded the return of the white gems of Lascalain. These stones were not just family heirlooms, but symbols of the former greatness of the elves of Doriath. Thranduil ordered Thorin to be thrown into the dungeon, suspecting him of espionage and an intent to rob the kingdom. He personally interrogated Thorin, demanding an explanation for their journey. But the dwarf was too proud and refused to reveal their plans, considering the elves traitors for not aiding Erebor in the past. He also refused to share any future treasures. Even under the threat of eternal imprisonment, Thorin did not reveal his true purpose: to kill Smaug and reclaim the kingdom. This only deepened Thranduil's suspicions. The Elven King did not keep the dwarves imprisoned for long. Soon they were rescued by Bilbo Baggins. Using the One Ring to become invisible, the Hobbit explored the palace. This allowed him to discover that the elves sent empty barrels down the forest river to Laketown. He used these barrels to smuggle the dwarves to freedom. When Thranduil discovered the escape, he was furious, but he did not pursue the dwarves, considering them unworthy of his attention. This fact suggests that their true purpose had never truly concerned him. It can be assumed that he merely used their presence as another opportunity to try and reclaim the ancient treasures of Doriath. However, the conflict between Thranduil and Thorin was far from over. They were destined to meet again very soon, during the Battle of the Five Armies. After Smaug's death, Thorin took possession of Erebor and all its treasures. Consumed by dragon's sickness, he refused to share any of the riches with the elves and men. In response, Thranduil decided to ally with Bard the Bowman to besiege the mountain and claim their rightful share. However, their plans were disrupted by an invasion of orcs from the Misty Mountains, led by Bolg, son of Azog. Despite the conflict with Thorin, they had to fight alongside the dwarves against the darkness. Thranduil led a vast army, thousands of elves in light armor, armed with bows and curved blades. His warriors took up position on the southern slopes of Erebor, creating a shield of arrows against the orcs. Thranduil fought in the front lines, his sword cutting through orcs like a reaper's scythe. He personally defended the flanks of the men when the orcs broke through to Bard's position. The elves also fought in coordination with Dain Ironfoot's forces, despite their mutual distrust. For a time, all past conflicts were forgotten in this battle. Even the grudges that had built up over millennia had to be set aside. But casualties were inevitable. Thorin, mortally wounded in battle, perished. Before his death, he managed to reconcile with Bilbo, with whom he had quarreled at Erebor, but not with Thranduil. The elves and dwarves would continue to argue for a long time. Only in the Fourth Age, when the great ancient elves left for Valinor, would peace finally come between their races. After the victory, Thranduil managed to reclaim his ancestral treasures at last. He finally retrieved the long-lost gems. However, he refused all other treasures. Later, it was revealed that the king took a trophy, one of Smaug's claws. From it, skilled smiths forged a dagger, which was gifted to Legolas. The battle was won, but Thranduil was not a king who celebrated victories. He knew the cost of triumph. To him, every battle was, first and foremost, a sorrowful loss. Thus, the elves returned home as victors, but with grief upon their faces. The Battle of the Five Armies demonstrated that even sworn enemies could unite against absolute evil. Thranduil, though he remained a proud and independent ruler, came to understand the value of alliances. He became more cautious about isolation, strengthening ties with Lothlorien and men. His actions saved not only the elves, but all of northern Middle-earth, laying the foundation for the future assault on Dol Guldur and the final expulsion of darkness from Mirkwood. In the year 3018 of the Third Age, the War of the Ring began. It was the culmination of the struggle of the free peoples of Middle-earth against Sauron, the Dark Lord of Mordor. The forces of evil sought to destroy Gondor, Rivendell, the elves, and men, as well as reclaim the One Ring, which granted absolute power. The war quickly escalated into one of the largest conflicts and affected Mirkwood. In the southern part of the forest, where Sauron had once hidden in the stronghold of Dol Guldur before being expelled by the White Council, darkness once again took hold. Sauron returned, filling the forest with orcs, spiders, and wraiths. The threat also came from the east. Orcs from the Misty Mountains and Sauron's human allies attacked Mirkwood's borders. Thranduil, ruling from his underground palace in the northern part of the forest, organized the defense, relying on his 11 archers and scouts. Additionally, he used the magic of the forest to slow the enemy and formed an alliance with Lothlorien. Though he regarded the High Elves with suspicion, the serious threat forced him to coordinate with Galadriel and Celeborn. In the battles along the borders, Thranduil proved himself a strong and wise commander. His experience from past wars played a key role. Elven settlements were attacked by orcs and spiders, but the king actively used forest warfare tactics. Ambushes, traps, and swift raids slowed the enemy's advance. In the battle under the trees, the elves demonstrated that they were the true rulers of Mirkwood. Their victory in this crucial battle was achieved through their knowledge of the terrain. Careful planning allowed them to crush the forces of Dol Guldur in a single day. Later, Thranduil met with Celeborn, who had won the Battle of Lorien. Together, they agreed to divide Mirkwood, which was renamed Greenwood the Great. The War of the Ring was not won solely at the walls of Minas Tirith or in the fires of Mount Doom. Victory was also forged in the depths of Mirkwood, where elves, like shadows, fought for every oak and every pathway. Thranduil made a significant contribution to the fight against darkness. Avoiding open battles, he relied on mobility. His warriors did not wear heavy armor, preferring speed and stealth. The king fought in the front lines, and his rune-inscribed sword became legendary among the elves. Moreover, Thranduil's compassion was revealed. During the war, he allowed refugees from Lake Town to seek shelter in his lands, something unprecedented in his reign. By the end of the war, Thranduil restored his kingdom to the glory of Doriath's days. The shadow completely left the forest, and its magical springs and trees were healed. All of this signaled a new era, for the pain that had tormented Thranduil since the death of his father had finally faded. With the end of the War of the Ring, the Age of Darkness in Middle-earth came to a close. For some time, minor conflicts continued. For instance, a few years after the war, orcs attempted to seize the underground city of Moria. Thranduil immediately sent his finest archers to aid its defense. This was remarkable, as the city was protected by dwarves, whom the king had always regarded with strained relations. Thranduil's rule took on new dimensions. Most of his time was now devoted to restoring the forest. The elves planted groves of malorn trees, golden trees gifted by Galadriel, whose roots purified the soil of corruption. Former spider-infested paths turned into blooming avenues, and crystal lanterns fueled by the magic of the stars lit up the underground palaces. The Elven King also began to foster better relations with neighboring realms. He allowed the people of the rebuilt Lake Town to gather medicinal herbs and hunt on the outskirts of the forest. In return, they supplied the elves with metals and textiles. He even made concessions to the dwarves. Thranduil and Dain II Ironfoot, the ruler of Erebor, exchanged gifts. The elves received gemstones to adorn their palace, while the dwarves were given rare woods for construction. Legolas left his homeland to establish his own elven colony in Ithilien, but continued to visit his father. Their relationship improved, as Thranduil became not only wiser but also warmer. He even ceased to criticize his son for befriending the dwarf Gimli. Mourning his father and beloved wife, Thranduil had long overlooked his son. He had sought the presence of his lost loved ones through the return of ancient treasures. When these artifacts were finally within his grasp, Thranduil suddenly realized that the only truly important link to his past had always been with him, Legolas. His son's beauty reminded him of his mother, while his reckless bravery echoed Orifer. Yet, Thranduil's melancholic nature remained. Though he rejoiced in the newfound peace, he still grieved for the departing age. Many of his kin sailed to Valinor, but he stayed behind. feeling a duty to the forest. He was often seen wandering alone by the river, contemplating the fate of the elves. By the end of the Fourth Age, sensing the wariness of the world, Thranduil began preparing his people for a future without him. He appointed a council of elders, entrusting them with the protection of the forest's laws. According to elven lore, Thranduil sailed west to Valinor, aboard one of Círdan the shipwright's last ships. This took place in the 2nd century of the Fourth Age. Along with him, other great elves departed as well. The forest remained under the protection of those elves who refused to leave Greenwood. They became a shadow people, rarely seen by humans, but their magic continued to shield Middle-earth from new threats. Thranduil left behind not only a memory of his great reign, but also a lesson in wisdom and bravery. His life was filled with battles against darkness, yet he always remained loyal to his people and his land. Mirkwood, once shrouded in shadow, became green again, thanks to his efforts and a certain degree of calculated strategy. Throughout his life, Thranduil was consumed by longing for times that could never return. He coveted treasures not out of greed, but because, deep down, he believed that through them, he could once again feel close to his father and wife, who had perished in endless wars. When the light finally prevailed, the old, scarred elf found hope in his son, and at last, he found peace. Though the elves have departed, their legacy, along with Thranduil's story, will forever remain in the legends of Middle-earth. His scars, his losses, and his victories. All of these are part of the great saga that continues to inspire. And that's all for now. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. Your engagement is the best reward for me. Thank you for watching, see you soon, goodbye.